Colleagues, today we debate a budget shaped not by choice but by circumstance. And those circumstances are stark. After years of brutal cuts to local government, councils across Scotland are being pushed to the brink, and Argyll and Bute is no exception. We are being forced to consider drastic decisions, decisions no responsible local authority should ever have to contemplate, because the Scottish Government has systematically stripped power, funding and flexibility away from local communities. But we must also recognise something else. Households across Argyll and Bute are under enormous pressure. Every week, families tell us they are struggling with rising food prices, higher energy bills, higher rent or mortgage costs. People are watching every penny. They are having to make difficult choices, and they are doing everything they can to stay afloat. So in that context, the decisions we make today here matter more than ever. We cannot add to the burden that residents are already carrying, and that is why our amendment keeps the council tax rise to a responsible 4.9%. It is why we have focused on protecting the services that people rely on the most. And it's why we have rejected proposals that would have made life harder for families, older residents, and those already facing hardship. Today, I am proposing an alternative Conservative budget that puts our communities first, while taking into account the financial pressure facing this council. These pressures are the direct result of years of unfair underfunding by the SNP government. At the heart of our amendment is a commitment to ensure Argyll and Bute remains a vibrant, connected and thriving place to live and work. We recognise that far too often local residents see their taxes going up while services decline, and at a time when people are already struggling with the cost of living. That's simply unacceptable. That's why our amendment concentrates resources on frontline services, protects the most vulnerable, and invests in the economic drivers that sustain our communities. And colleagues, I want to turn directly to health and social care, because if there is one area that exposes the scale of the crisis facing local government, it is this. For months, we have heard repeated warnings about the pressures in the HSCP. We have seen the reports, we have heard the concerns from staff, from families, from service users. We know that the system is under extraordinary strain. And yet, despite all of this administration refused to recognise it as an emergency. When services for the most vulnerable are at risk, when budgets are spiralling, and when demand is rising faster than capacity, and when the sustainability of care provision is in question, what else do you call it? And here is the blunt truth. If the HSCP had been funded properly, as set out in the Coslow Manifesto, Argyll and Bute would have received an additional £10 million. £10 million that would have been available to stabilise services, support staff, and meet the needs of our most vulnerable residents. £10 million that every member in this chamber knows that we desperately need. £10 million that the Scottish Government chose not to provide. So I ask again, given the scale of the challenges, given the level of investment now required simply to stop services from collapsing, does this administration finally accept that this is an emergency? Because if a £10 million shortfall in care funding does not meet the threshold, then what would? Our amendment sets aside £4.5 million because we recognise the seriousness of the situation. Without intervention, services will fail. The people who rely on care, older residents, people with disabilities and families in crisis cannot wait for political hesitation to catch up with reality. We have also rejected the proposal to remove early year third sector grants. These grants provide vital support to families with young children, and cutting them would be reckless, especially at a time when the cost of living is already stretching household budgets to breaking point. And we have strengthened support for advice centres, food banks and women's aid. These organisations are dealing daily with the human consequences of a system under pressure. They are also supporting people who are struggling financially, emotionally and practically. Their work has never been more important. This is not a moment for complacency. It's a moment to acknowledge reality. And the reality is that health and social care in Argyll and Bute is facing an emergency, whether the administration choose to use that word or not. Our budget proposal also rejects a series of cuts to frontline services, including public toilets, street sweeping, environmental wardens, and customer service points. These are services on which our residents rely to keep our communities clean, safe, and welcoming. They are key facilities for both residents and visitors. Cutting them would be short-sighted and damaging. At a time when people are already feeling the strain of rising costs, the last thing they need is a further decline in services that they depend on. Our communities deserve better. On infrastructure, our amendment includes a 2-year £22 million programme of roads reconstruction. In a rural authority like ours, roads are critical infrastructure that underpin our economy and connect our communities. We also commit an additional £7 million to the Mull School project, ensuring equitable education opportunities across Argyll and Bute. And we reject the proposed £1.8 million refurbishment of Kilmorey Castle. At a time when frontline services are under threat, additional spending of this amount on a headquarters building would be indefensible. That money must go where it is needed most and into our communities. We have also protected the future of key facilities that were facing closure, recognising their value as hubs of health, well-being, culture and community. These facilities matter. They are part of the social fabric of our communities. They support health, learning, culture and family life. By protecting these, we ensure that residents of all ages continue to have access to swimming, learning and vital local services and activities. Colleagues, recognising the enormous social and economic value of local events, our amendment commits funding to festivals, games and competitions that attract visitors and showcase Argyll and Bute nationally and internationally. These events celebrate our culture and heritage. They generate vital income for local businesses, hospitality providers and communities across the region. They are not optional extras. They are economic drivers. And in a cost of living crisis, supporting local jobs, tourism and economic activity is not a luxury. It is essential. This is a budget shaped by national failure. Let us be frank about why councils across Scotland are being forced into these impossible choices. Local government has been hollowed out. The Scottish Government's approach to funding is overly complex, overly centralised and overly restrictive. Councils are being micromanaged by Edinburgh while being starved of the resources that they need. The Scottish Conservatives have set out a clear national plan to reverse this. We want to simplify council funding and end excessive ring fencing and bring power closer to the people. That is the direction Scotland needs, and it is the direction that this amendment reflects. This amendment shows that it is possible to deliver a responsible budget while protecting what matters most to our communities. We have prioritised practical solutions, safeguarded valued facilities, supported economic activity, and ensured necessary services remain accessible. At a time of financial pressure, the Conservatives have put communities first by proposing a budget that reflects the priorities of the people of Argyll and Bute. Deputy Provosts, colleagues, this is a budget that is rooted in reality, shaped by responsibility and driven by a commitment to the people we serve, and I commend it to the Council.